boop, boop. All right, guys. So let's do, I don't know what I'm doing. Hold on. I have 2 days to work on this car. I've carved out a little time to work on a personal project for a change. It doesn't happen very often, but this thing, I've been whittling away at it a little bit at a time for the last while. And so today and tomorrow, I would like to get it to move under its own power, which is a lot. So I'll walk around and do a quick recap, and then I've got the whiteboard out and we're gonna fill out the task list, which is large. So let's do a quick walk around. All right, so our story begins on a fall evening in 1979. No, just kidding. I have had this car a long time, not quite that long. So what are we going to do? We've got a lot to get done. We're gonna start with the fuel system. So we've got the basket that drops into the fuel tank, feed and return, and then I'll get into this in a little more detail later, but basically a low pressure fuel pump feeding a container for the high pressure fuel pump, and that's what's gonna run to the motor. So overkill for the natural aspirated setup, but it should make it not starve for fuel. We've got the dry cell battery in its mount that was made earlier this year. That needs to get bolted down, and then a few more electrical things to wrap up. That doesn't have to get bolted down today. I can just hook it up and let it sit in the trunk. We can circle back to that later. So we gotta whittle down the list to the critical things. So the tailpipes come up to about here. I need to make the X pipe up to the manifolds. Should be easy-ish. Transmission, LT1 style T56, that's been converted. That's done. Drive shaft is done. I think the shifter's bolted down, but I need to put fluid in the transmission, so that's one of the checklist items. I have the McLeod hydraulic conversion kit for the clutch, so that would be master cylinder and reservoir and bracketry. The hydraulic throwout's already in with extended lines and an extended bleeder, so that it's gonna take some time, but it should be straightforward. Motor, I've got the bajillion mile aluminum 5.3. I need to make a throttle cable. I have the conduit in and that's basically all in. I just need to make the cable. Fuel rails are in. I've got the crossover on the front finished. We've got the line going down to the regulator, so I need to get the line coming from the tank, and I guess that would be technically the return, and then the feed will go right over there somewhere. Anyway, it'll snake up around the back of the motor and go to the feed. So feed and return to the trunk. I've got a bulkhead fitting to go back there. Let's see, motor's in, coil packs are mounted, manifolds are mounted. I need to put plugs and wires in. I've got the intake done, coolant reservoir. So all the coolant lines are finished. I just need to heat shrink the heat shrink lines. I'm gonna hold off on that for just a moment, because I think I know I can start it up dry and make sure the motor sounds happy before I fill it with antifreeze. The steam line just needs the steam line just needs zip tied up out of the way. We're not gonna worry about power steering for a moment. Probably just gonna bolt this down, and it's basically ready aside from electrical, but we'll get that hooked up and leave that for now. Coolant sensors in the head. This is my extended line. That's probably out of shot. Coolant sensors in the head. This is my extended line for my oil pressure sensor for the gauges, and the oil pressure sending unit. You see that? The oil pressure sending unit is still in the block for the Terminator. So I'll have two oil pressure senders. Not that that's a big deal. TPS is in, IAC is in. Okay, so not a huge amount. I need to put a line here for the vacuum reservoir, or words are hard today. I need to put a line in here for the booster. Everything else is bolted down and looking pretty decent. I made this coupling a while ago that bolts into the fan shroud. And this is a cut up Silverado radiator hose, but that's looking pretty decent. I think that's enough rambling. Let's go to the whiteboard. I'll set up another camera and we'll go through the list. All right, pretty good list started. So feed and return lines, fuel pump wiring, oil pressure sender, fill with oil, install the starter, fill transmission, spark plugs, wires, seat brackets, not necessarily needed, but very nice if I actually want to drive it around. Holly grommet, I'll show that in a minute. That's the pass-through for the firewall. The Terminator X install should be pretty plug and play. X-pipe and mufflers, throttle cable, clutch hydraulics, coolant hoses, coolant. We'll save that for when it's running, so we can put those off for now. And then, like I mentioned, electric power steering, we'll just bolt it down so it doesn't rattle around. All right, this is enough to get started. Let's get started. All right, it's a little after 5 o'clock, and we made some good progress. The adapter plate is in here. If you peek, you actually can't even see it from the top, can you? There we go. Right back in there is the clutch master cylinder. So here's the clutch reservoir, the remote bleeder that'll get tucked away and zip tied. So a bit of a snafu. I forgot there's a fitting that goes in for the remote bleeder. I thought it was like an inverted flare fitting. It turns out it needed a crush washer. So made a bit of a mess. Had to pull the transmission back, drive shaft out, trans cross member out. Yeah, we're good now. Rebled again. The bleeding part was easy, but trans is back to where it needs to be. Before we put the shifter back in, we're gonna go ahead and fill the trans up with trans fluid. And let's see. We're making good progress. Let me get a pen. And we'll go through, not what I wanted. I'd get a dry erase marker, but I don't have any. So, clutch hydraulics, smiley face, throttle cable's done. Let's see, oil pressure sender. I got the second one, that's for the speed height gauge, spark plugs, coil wires, a couple easy items. So, a lot of stuff. Got everything done on the electric power steering except for the wiring. So we'll leave that open for now. Yeah, we're making progress, but it's taking effort. So, back to it. It's day 2, and starting to get the Terminator X wiring, the Holly system wiring out of the box and start to see what's going on. I'm making a change right now. So the fuel pressure sensor was out here near the coolant temp, and basically the fuel pressure sensor was gonna land out here somewhere, and I need it over there. So we stripped it back because it was loomed out of this junction. We stripped it all the way back to where the ground was connected. So I'm gonna relume this piece, but that should give me enough to get across the engine bay. So otherwise, I think everything's gonna be fine. Yeah, I'm gonna relume this up, and then we'll punch a hole in the firewall and get the grommet in. So let's press on. All right, done. So taped up, loomed up. Whoa, there we go. So I think that's the only change to the main harness. Clean up a few things, and then let's go poke that hole over there. That's done. I'm gonna put the ring on it, and then I have the 3D printed bits for the pass-through, but I'm ready to start stringing the wiring harness in for the Terminator. Kind of a fun one. I've got new boots for the shifter, and I gotta clean up some of the old hackery that younger me did, but I've got this generic boot, and it wasn't big enough to go over the power tower, the big shifter. So 3D printed a little adapter, cut the boot and safety wired it on just because I didn't have any hose clamps that big, but let's see if this is gonna work. Really just trying to keep the dust out. Oh, it's a nice fit. That looks good. Oh, that looks really good. All right, we'll come back later and clean up the rest of this, but this is looking pretty decent. There we go. Cool. That'll work. Let's carry on. We're starting to get the wiring fed through the hole. And the wiring terminated. It's a little tight back here, but let's get under the car and we'll do the crank sensor, cam, and oil pressure, and then the rest of it should be pretty easy. Quick update, I have the old heater controls. This is actually a 3D printed plate I made many years ago. This was a vintage air heat only unit, which was never that great. And right now it's getting replaced with a blank. So it's nice to have the 3D print files, just go back and modify them and reprint. So radio delete, eventually I'm gonna make a new whole dash inlay, but for now, that's gonna be okay. All right, carry on. So this is the previous start and charge wiring harness. And we're gonna, let's see. It's this section right here, which runs starter, alternator, horns, which I don't care about, a couple other small things. None of that's critical. So we're gonna pare this down to pink power in, red power in. We'll figure it out. Let's pair this. Got a couple fusible links, and then most of this is gonna get trimmed out. So see if we can't clean this harness up a little bit. All right, so here's where we are after day 2. Did not get to the fuel lines or the fuel pump. I was working on that. It's the last thing. I did fill it with oil because I was going to test the starter. That leads me to today's problem. Seat bracket. The Terminator X is close, but also it needs the tack output, keyed power, and power to the battery. So some final like battery power, but it's close. No change on exhaust. I got one little thing to fix on the clutch, but otherwise it's done. Coolant hoses, I heat shrunk them just because I can. I'll fill it with coolant later. This is done enough to start the car. I'll come back and wire that later. So the problem is that I have nothing happening with the key. So I've got power to a bulkhead, feeding to the alternator, and then off of that, I'm pulling the 2 fusible links that should feed into the factory harness. From there, this is one of the outputs that should be what was the distributor. So I was just gonna check that and see what that actually turned out to be. The problem is that I'm not getting switched power to the purple wire that runs to the solenoid. And that's weird, because it started before I took it apart. I'm also not getting headlight power or basically any dash power. So let's see. That's all coming in. Get a pointer. So here's your battery. And then it's a little shaky. Everything comes in here to the red. These come down. So you end up with 2 fusible links here, red and red. That's your main incoming power. Pink is coming out to the distributor, and purple. Purple ends up here at the starter solenoid. So it should have been straightforward to bring power to the reds, and purple should have bumped the starter. But I don't know what, I must have missed something, because everything up here is red off the battery, fusible links, red to the alternator. You got a bunch of connections, and then they all come into this connection here. I probed all the way to this fusible link, these 2 fusible links, and I have power. Well, everything's grounded, so I don't know. I'm missing something. I was all excited to to crank it with no ignition or fuel or anything, just hear it turn over. So good progress. Actually, no, great progress. I just have some stuff to figure out. The wiring turned out nice. I've got the power line to the starter and the power line going over to feed the alternator. I got to order a resistor to excite the alternator. I've got the connector for it. I just don't have the 400 and some ohm resistor to put in line. This bundle of wires is just sitting here, but I do have the dash back in, which it'll probably have to come out now if I can't figure out what's going on with power. And I'm about ready to assemble the dual fuel pump situation. I've got a couple small tubing pieces that need to be welded in. Yeah. On top of that, I've been filming in vertical mode, so that's really helpful. Okay. Mostly good. A couple setbacks. Yeah, it's enough for today. That's the end of day 2. It's nearly bedtime. Call it. I'm gonna try and chip away at it the next couple days before I have to get back to customer work, so the next couple evenings. I would still like to, we'll figure this out. I'm sure it's something simple I'm overlooking. We'll get this figured out. Sanity check. There's 2 fusible links coming in, and I've got power to both of them. So I've got power at the back of the alternator, which is what you'd expect. I don't know what I'm missing. Why don't I have headlights? Why don't I have the starter bumping over? Okay, we'll keep going, but I gotta stop for tonight, so. Lots done, lots to do. Here we go. Okay, you might say things have escalated a little bit, but I, for the life of me, couldn't get power from the 2 power feed inputs into the fuse block. So this is long overdue. I'm gonna pull this out. We're gonna go through the whole harness and figure out what can go and what can stay. All I really need are lights and then key on power and start wire to the starter. The gauges are all standalone. The Holley's gonna be standalone. So let's see if we can't figure out why I don't have power coming into this block. Where is it going? Why is it not getting to where it needs to go? So I'll get this strung out on a bench and we'll take a look at it. All right, this is getting a little ugly, but let's see if we can sort through this. So firewall connector splits from the fuse box. So I've got power into the 2 fusible links that come through, the 2 red feeds. One's coming to this guy, no idea what that is. The other one was going up here to the headlight switch. That was cut. I'm not sure who did that. So I've got headlight switch, brake light switch, windshield wiper. Most of this can go away. This was all the original gauge cluster. The only thing I might try to keep is to see if I can isolate the brown wire. That's what goes back to the alternator. I'll do the resistor on the feed. So if I can figure out where that is, that should be coming off the keyed switch somewhere. So don't know what this is. These 2 go to the ignition switch. This is going to the column. So I believe this is gonna be your left turn, right turn, and hazard flashers, and something else probably. We'll figure that out. The buzzer can go away. All of this is HVAC stuff, best I can tell, so I can pare most of this out. This connector can probably go. And I don't know what this particular brown is doing. So let's see if we can sort through the wiring diagrams and clear some of the junk out of this. Yeah. Not ideal, but it needs to be done. So much as I want to rush through everything, I think I need to slow down and take a little time now to clean this up so that I can get everything working the first time. Okay. It's good. All right, so I've got this guy cleaned up quite a bit. I've got a few extra light wires that I have to figure out. But otherwise, I tried to do it kind of octopus style, where I cleaned it into various runs, and I'll tape them up just a little bit more. That's a dedicated ground for the windshield wipers. This is the fuel gauge wire, I believe. And I've got a few extra, now that I stripped out all the heater stuff, I've got a few extra powers. So I've got a light on power, the gray. Brown, I think, is the heater key on power. I believe most of these are key on power, with exception of, I think, the red. But I've got them in this Deutsch connector, so I can come in and repin this if I need to, or I'll make up a mating connector for this. The rest of this should plug in as normal. I fixed the splice to the headlight wire. What is this guy? Oh, fuel gauge, that goes here. I'll clean that. I gotta clean that up and splice that guy. But otherwise, this is ready to go back in the car. Cleaned a bunch of stuff out of it, so it's definitely thinned down. I am taking this opportunity to clean the gauges. I had a cheap wrap on there because it just needs refinished, I think. I think it's the clear coat that's yellowed over time. But I'm gonna make up a mount where the AC vents are to hold the Terminator touchscreen. And then I'm gonna make a block off for the AC vent because that's no longer functional. And I might try some paint stripper. I've got some, to see if that'll take the clear off, and maybe that'll get rid of some of the tarnish. I mean, if not, it still looks less fake than the vinyl, so it's a progress. But I'm getting a little distracted in the details. At the same time, I don't want to have to redo everything again unnecessarily. So I'm going to try and get this cleaned up and back in. I did figure out, I think, I haven't tested this yet, but I think what happened is this connector is not pokey yoked, meaning you can very much bolt the firewall piece in 180 out, and I'm pretty sure that's what happened, because everything I probed in here showed fine, but let's see, this bolts in the car like this, and all the powers and ground, or all the powers are on the left. But on this guy, as I was installing it, the powers are on the right. So it would appear, looks like it doesn't go, but I think this plastic is flexible enough that it goes in the wrong way. So it actually goes in like this, and we'll be able to test that pretty quickly. So I'll get that back in the car soon. But we're out of time for today. This is day 3 of my 2-day project to get this thing running. That should tell you how it's going. But I think I figured out the mystery, and hopefully I can sneak out tomorrow night and get the wiring harness back in the car, get cleaned up and ready for my normal Friday work. And oh, what a ride, you know? So we'll get this back in the car. But this needed to be done. My hope is that I can make a Deutsch connector. So I've got, I think, a 12 terminal guy here. If I can make a 12 terminal, and then I can have the gauges plug in and out a little easier. So I've stripped there's the trim piece, and then the upper, whatever, the windshield washer. But these gauges were wired up pretty hack. I think I used bread ties to hold the wiring. I was out of budget the last time. So I'm gonna try and clean this up a little bit, and I'm gonna try to make up the light power and overall power to make them quick connects. That should be better, because right now it's got a whole bunch of little connections, and then I had them running off a toggle switch, and we're gonna do better this time. So we're gonna mount this up in the bezel somewhere for the dimmable lights. and then we're gonna power it correctly this time off the key. So hopefully we get rid of the goofy toggle switches. It's always been a bit hack, and we'll get back to the, let's get back to the fun stuff. Let's hear this thing run. We're minor detour, but we're almost there. All right, day 3, we're out. All right, quick update on day 4. Well, the end of day 4. So a little bit of progress this evening. I've got the wiring harness back in. New oil pressure sensor in. I've got the MAT sensor, the IAT sensor. I'll eventually drill that and get that into the or the intake. I'll eventually drill that and get that into the intake. The clutch pedal, I had a little thing I had to fix on the clutch pedal, and I've got the interior harness back in. Wipers are working, and it cranks over off the key, which is good. I verified that I have the brown wire connected correctly. It's showing 12 volts with key on, so then resistor, then S terminal. Headlights are still not working. I'll have to dig into that and figure out why, but I've got crank. It cranks over, it sounds good. And I've got the fuel pump assembly ready to drop in. So a quick overview, I've got the low pressure pump, and then that feeds up and over to the polyethylene tank. And then this is the return line, this is the outlet port. And then you've got the studs passing through. So these are gasketed with fiber gaskets. And then all the wiring down. So did a continuity check from the housing to each stud just to make sure everything's looking good. So low pressure, high pressure, should never starve for fuel in cornering, at least I hope not. Yeah, so I got these guys labeled plus minus. So red, black, black, red, black, black, red. Okay, so this is good. We'll ground those two guys. Yeah, this is done and ready to go in the car. So we're pretty close to ready to fire. I think I've got to fix one coil pad. Yep, that one. I got a new coil pack, so I'll get this replaced. It probably would have been okay, but for 15 bucks, we're just going to go ahead and replace that one. And the wiring harness adapter was missing from my Holly kit, so we got that on order. All these nickels and dimes are eating into the play fund a little bit, but we're gonna be okay. So we got 2 hoses to run back, and then some wiring to do back here. Should be straightforward. All right, I got the key hooked up, so we can actually go ahead and crank it over a little bit and give it a listen, because it sounds, I mean, it's just cranking, but. Yeah, sounds okay. I'll know as soon as I power the Holly on if we're building cranking oil pressure. Hopefully we are. And yeah, I think we're a few hours away from firing this guy. So I'm gonna wrap it up here for the night. I'm gonna get this guy in the tank, maybe start throwing a couple bolts in it, and then call it a night. All right, paint stripped, clear coated. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. All right, quick update on the gauges. So AC delete plate, printed at a nice snug fit, and then super glued. It's flanged on the backside. The bezel has been paint stripped and clear coated, and frankly, it's never looked better. It's not great. If you get just right, you can see the pitting. I mean, it's old and it's a little, it's okay. It, to me, looks wonderful. So all the gauges, the speed height gauges are back in. They're looking really sharp. I've got the printed mount that covers up the AC, the former AC ports, and the cigarette lighter. And then I made that the pass-through for the Terminator. This is a cheap Amazon phone mount that locks and then It's spring loaded in this direction. So my thinking is that this will hold the Terminator and you can cock it a little bit towards the driver, which is cool. I'll feed the excess wire around the backside. So if you're here and you look over, that's going to be facing towards you. This is looking stellar. I've got some cleanup to do on the backside, certainly with the wiring. I think I mentioned that already. Here's the mounting feature. So printed a male feature to come through just for location, and you can see it located it pretty well. And then I recessed it for a fender washer. The bolts are a little offsided just to get everything to fit just right, and then the fender washers are pinching directly on. So this is working well. We'll see how rigid it is when it's in the dashboard, but now I've got to clean up the sensor wires, figure out a place to put the dimmer. I'll probably end up reprinting or just drilling a hole, frankly, into this guy. Not overly sure where I want to do that yet, but that's the dimmer for the backlights. And then these all get stitched together with the inputs. Just like to tidy this up a little bit, but we'll see how carried away we get. So anyway, carrying on. Pretty sharp look. So this is turning out pretty good. Let's see. I've got the dimmer tucked in here. I drilled out one of the holes where it used to have that's some little emblem or gauge in there. I can't even remember what it was now. Let's see. So the block off, printed, glued in. That looks good. Added a Deutsch connector for the tachometer because I don't have any more of the crimp fittings for these guys. So the rest of these are going to stay. They're okay. I pulled out and tried to clean up the power stuff as best I could. So I've got ground's black, pink is switch power, orange is battery power or permanent power. So I'll get this back in the car. I need to put the connector on the tack line, and then I'm missing one. Oil, tack, where's my fuel wire? I should have a fuel gauge somewhere. I'm gonna have to do a little digging here because it's probably this one. Oh, I might have screwed something up. All right, let's see what gauge is this. Speedo and fuel. So this should be my fuel stuff. Okay, we'll come back to that. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. I didn't get a good video of this because it was honestly hard to record and quite messy, but I forgot a crush washer. I thought that it was a tapered fitting on the feed line from the master to the slave cylinder. It was a fitting that required a crush washer. Everything bled fine, extended bleeder, etc., and then it puddle fluid. So I had to remove the drive shaft, the transmission cross member, lower the thing down, split the trans off. I ended up doing that twice. Talk about a comedy of errors. Very frustrating. So third time, I'm embarrassed to say. The first time I thought the fitting was loose, and then I figured out that I was actually missing the crush washer reinstalled, reinstalled trans. What a mess. Several hours lost just on this fiasco. So I blame past me for all of my problems. Moving on. Quick update on the bottom of the Trans Am. And I've got the bracket adjusted on the driver's tailpipe. Same thing on the passenger tailpipe. Ended up cutting this joint and reclocking it so that it actually exits. It was pointing right at the quarter panel before. So these are the original tailpipes from a long time ago. Got them wrapped over the axle, V-bands. These are the Flowmaster, the Flow FX bullet mufflers. So I've started to fit the various pipes down to the X pipe. It's a prefab like eBay unit, overseas unit. I've got the joggle, fits nicely in the transmission cross member, and that's going up to driver's manifold. So I've got to figure out something to do with the passenger manifold. I thought I was good, but I don't have enough room to spin the nut on, so I gotta do. So I've got to do something there, but otherwise I have the piece cut that comes back to here, so it's gonna have a similar joggle to get into here. That's all. Two into the X pipe and back out. Bullets, the laser cut brackets with the isolators and the Flowmaster. Yeah. So turned out good. A little more elaborate than I cared for, but this fits the floor well. So let's get it back in the car. Exhaust in, mounts looking good. Still need to tighten. I'll get the right bolts for this. I just have garbage bolts in here for now. But it's good enough for the moment. Mounts are tight, and I'll probably pull this tailpipe out and shorten it to match the passenger side, but for the moment, it's good enough. X-pipe's looking good. Wideband is in, I just need to strap up the wiring nice and tight. Now I've got to figure out where to run the fuel lines. I was hoping it would be obvious where to route them. I think, I actually still don't know. I think I'm gonna poke a hole here for my bulkhead fitting. And if I turn, I don't know what I wanna do yet. Next up, but I have more clearance now than I ever had before. Exhaust is basically rigid mounted, which is fine because the motor is rigid mounted. So that's enough, let's continue. All right, I've got two drill bits close enough to use to kind of use this as its own drill fixture. I know it's not completely parallel, but it will work. Let's do it. Try to peek in here. We got return line, rear line, and then the front line feed. These are tightened down to the bulkhead fitting. We've got the return going straight into the bucket. Feed line is 90ing out, 180ing into the filter, and then out. It's probably a tidier way to do this. I'm thinking about making a mount that utilizes one or two of the bolts in the hat just to capture this and keep it from bouncing around. I should tighten that fitting while I'm here. Anyway, pretty sharp, reasonably tidy. Could probably make a cover panel for all of this, but that's another day's project. All right, so we're riding the struggle bus. I'm not getting fuel or spark, and I'm not sure why. It's getting the occasional cranking error, charged battery, decent cranking speed. Replaced the crank sensor just in case. I swapped the cam sensor, no change, with a known from the Cutlass because it doesn't use a cam sensor. So easy swap. Known good coils and plug wires just to try and rule things out a little bit. And I just want to hear it run, you know, just fire. But plugs are dry. It's not getting any fuel, not showing any spark. I swapped a known good Terminator from the Camaro just to see, no change. Didn't expect one. The problem is, I don't know what the problem is, but it's probably wiring or sensor, and I think I ruled out sensors, so might have to dig into the wiring harness on this one. I've had a few silly mistakes in this video. The original issues with the headlights and the power going through the wiring harness, I literally had the wiring harness flipped 180 degrees. I don't think I ever clarified that. So in a similar vein, this issue, I'm going through, I'm seeing cranking errors, I'm seeing, you know, no fuel, no spark. I'm checking, you know, the coils are unknown, you know, they're all junkyard parts. I'm trying to do this on a very tight budget. And I'm like, okay, I have known coils in my other car. I pull those off, I swap them over. I'm checking coils one by one. I'm checking injector connections, I'm opening the wiring harness. And eventually I get to the point where I'm like, okay, I've checked the crank sensor, I've checked the ECU. I pull the whole wiring harness back out of the car. I've got good voltage, I've got a new starter, I'm good cranking speed. I see hoof prints and I'm looking for zebras and I should be looking for horses. So crank sensor, checking gap to the 24X wheel, all of these things. Ultimately, I own the harness. The harness shows, you know, less than 1 ohm on every connection. Basically, it's, you know, it's excellent. Okay, maybe I missed something stupid. So I go back and check, and what I thought were outputs on the harness, there was one that was very critical. It was a red wire that was power input that fed the fuel pump and the injectors. And it's like, son of a bitch, I'm an idiot. So yeah, the harness is great. All that to say, I skipped the install of the harness, basically put it back to how it was 4 hours ago, and we're gonna start the damn thing. Yeah, it's pretty much what you'd expect at this point. So watch and see. This is my longest video to date. Trying to cram a lot into one video. I didn't want to make this a multi-part series, but my goal was to start this car and drive it by the end of 2025. I took it apart in October of 2022, so just over 3 years ago. I had a lot of parts stockpiled, but at the same time there was a lot of work to do to switch over from the small block Chevy T5, very bottom budget high school build, to the a little bit more refined but still junkyard build 5.3 T56, hydraulic clutch, and I'm running Holley Terminator X, hoping for some future expansion with, you know, supercharger, turbocharger, something. Anyway, this was I'm a little embarrassed to say a comedy of errors with the bulkhead wiring harness, the crush washer missed on the slave cylinder that cost me a few hours of time, and then really chasing my tail. And I didn't illustrate it well in this video how much time I spent practically beating my head against the wall trying to figure out what was going on with the crank sensor errors and lack of spark, lack of fuel, especially when I basically just built the mate to this car with the Terminator X, the same 5.3 cam springs combo, and that one fired literally on the first try. So what was I doing wrong? The answer, I missed the wire, and I'm an idiot sometimes, but the car started, sounds great, good oil pressure. I'm so excited to tidy up some of the wiring, get the checklist of things wrapped up, and, you know, drive this car in 2026. So some more work coming up in the next couple months, chip away at some of these little things, but I started it, I ran it, it sounds good. Damn it, I'm excited. Let's go! If you made it this far, you have incredible patience. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. It's the 20th of December. I do hope to have an end of the year, kind of a wrap up my YouTube journey and the year of 2025 as a whole. If not, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'll catch you guys next week.